China has recorded its highest number of daily COVID cases since the pandemic began, despite stringent measures designed to eliminate the virus. Several major cities, including the capital Beijing, southern trade hub Guangzhou, are experiencing an outbreak. Wednesday saw 31,527 cases recorded, compared with an April peak of 28,000. The numbers are still tiny for a country of 1.4 billion people, and officially just over 5,200 have died since the pandemic began. Well, that equates to 3 COVID deaths in every million in China, compared with 3,000 per million in the US and 2,400 per million in the UK, although direct comparisons between countries are difficult. While China's zero COVID policy has clearly saved lives, it has also dealt a punishing blow to the economy and ordinary people's lives. The country slightly relaxed some of those restrictions a few weeks ago. Staying with health, measles has killed 12 children in the western Indian city of Mumbai and surrounding areas. Authorities say the first death was reported around 26th to the 27th of October, when 3 children died within 48 hours. The city had 233 confirmed cases this year until Wednesday, a 3-fold jump from the 92 cases and 2 deaths reported last year. Authorities say a sluggish vaccination drive amid the COVID pandemic has contributed to the spike in infections. The latest reported death Tuesday was an 8-month-old baby who was partially immunized. In a press note, the local municipal body said measles is highly contagious, even more than COVID, and can cause serious complications, especially in children less than 5 years. The disease, which causes coughing, rashes, fever, can be prevented by 2 doses of the mumps, measles and rubella, the MMR vaccine. There have been several large outbreaks in countries across Europe where MMR vaccine uptake has been low. 9 in every 10 people can catch it if they are unvaccinated and exposed. Well, still on health, Malawi is currently experiencing its worst cholera outbreak in over a decade. To make matters worse, the country, which already experiences PPE and medicine shortages, has to deal with the global cholera vaccine shortage as declared by the World Health Organization.
At a cholera ward in Malawi's commercial capital, Blantyre, a nurse checks the IV in a patient's arm. The patient is one victim of the southern African country's worst cholera outbreak in more than a decade. For her mother, Elder Firi, it's the second time in this ward.
Her younger sister was also right here, in this very room, a couple of days ago. I can testify that cholera is a serious disease and we need to take precautions.
Malawi's outbreak has killed at least 292 people and infected 9,447 since the first cases were reported in March this year. The Ministry of Health says the current outbreak has a mortality rate of 3.1%, up from 2% in March. Understaffed, undersupplied, and undersupported, the Malawian healthcare system has identified a few health centers to create cholera treatment camps where patients have been arriving in droves.
When you want to, you know what to do, but then you don't have this, you don't have enough equipment, and you don't have the supplies and the resources that you need to conduct your or to deliver your work. Then that comes a challenge and a drawback for you to deliver.
To make matters worse, an existing shortage of treatments in Malawi is now compounded by a global vaccine shortage. The World Health Organization declared in October that they would follow a single-dose strategy for the time being, even though the cholera vaccine needs 2 doses to be most effective. This is so that more people can be reached with the vaccine and at least have partial immunity. At the Indirande Health Center, clinician Pilirani Wanja is showing Blantyre residents how to self-administer an oral cholera vaccine. She says that out of 32 cholera cases received at the health center, none had taken the oral cholera vaccine. According to the Minister of Health, Kumbize Chiponda, the waterborne disease has spread to all of the country's 29 districts. This is unusual for cholera, which spreads when rains are heavy and floods are prevalent. Now, healthcare workers are worried about the upcoming rainy season.
And to South Africa, where about 7,004 people were murdered in the country between July and September 2022. That is an increase of 841 compared to the same time last year. South Africa's Police Minister Bekisele released its second quarter crime statistics in Pretoria, which also show that the province of KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape recorded the highest counts of murder during the period. Mr. Sele says aggression and violence are at worrying levels in the country. He adds that the month of July and September this year saw a record number of assault cases reported to the police in 5 years. Violence against women and children also remain high.
The worrisome numbers from the police show that rape, kidnapping and hijackings were on the rise in the country, and that between July and September 2022, 13,000 women in South Africa were victims of assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. In just 6 months from April to September, 558 children were killed. The police minister, Bekisele, says these statistics show that communities are failing to protect children.
Shockingly, in just 6 months, 558 children were killed in South Africa from April to the end of September 2022. Police are investigating attempted murder dockets of 294 children from July to September 2022. 1,895 assault GBH cases with children as victims were opened with the police during this reporting period.
Assault, murder and multiple murders have also gone up. Crime stats show that arguments, misunderstanding and provocation are the leading causes of murder, followed by vigilantism. 7,004 people were killed by other persons in South Africa in the second quarter of 2022-2023 financial year. This is an increase of 841 more people murdered compared to the same period in 2021, when the country was placed under COVID-19 lockdown for 3 and 2. Argument, misunderstanding and incidents of road rage provocations accounted for 956 murders in the country. Vigilantism incidents claimed the lives of 528 people, while 362 people were killed during the commission of robbery. Members of the police service form part of the statistics reeled out, and Minister Cele says police officers must meet fire with fire.
Fighting crime has also come at a cost for the members of the South African Police Service across the country. 22 police officers were killed during July to September 2022. This is 2 members less compared to the same reporting period last year. It is on this note that the ministry will never stop calling on SAPS members to defend themselves decisively at all times from ruthless criminals whenever they are under attack. It is quite simple. Police must meet fire with fire.
As the festive season approaches, Minister Cele says there will be more police visibility. He has also encouraged the citizens to report crime and not take the law into their own hands.
Meanwhile, South Africa's prison service has said it will challenge a court decision that sent former President Jacob Zuma back to jail. The Department of Correctional Services, DCS, said in a statement that having carefully studied the judgment, Correctional Services is convinced that another court may arrive at a different conclusion. Earlier in the week, the Supreme Court of Appeal had ordered Mr. Zuma to return to prison after upholding a ruling that his medical parole had been unlawful. The 80-year-old was given a 15-month 18-month sentence last year for contempt of court over his refusal to testify during an investigation into corruption. But he was released after 2 months in jail when his lawyers argued that he had an undisclosed terminal illness and needed medical care that could not be provided in prison. Away from South Africa, the United Nations and humanitarian partners in Kenya are appealing for over $400 million to help 4.3 million drought-affected people in 2023 in support of the government-led response as the crisis is expected to worsen. During a visit to Garissa County, the Deputy President of Kenya and the UN Resident Coordinator, also the UN Environment Programme Executive, called on the international community to step up their solidarity with communities who are facing the devastating consequences of the longest and most severe drought in Kenya's recent history. And away from Africa, the UN Human Rights Chief has made a strong appeal to Iranian authorities to stop their unnecessary and disproportionate use of force against protesters in Iran in a speech to the Human Rights Council on the ongoing crisis. The body is debating a motion brought by a group of some 50 countries led by Germany and Iceland to create a new investigative fact-finding mission to probe alleged abuses since a wave of protests began over the death in custody of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini September 16. The meeting is seen as a key test of the West's clout within the Council, following a thwarted attempt to create greater scrutiny of China's human rights record last month.
Opinions without fear of arrest and imprisonment. According to reliable sources, a conservative estimate of the death toll so far stands at over 300, including at least 40 children. This is unacceptable. Around 14,000 people, including children, have so far been arrested in the context of these protests. This is a staggering number. My office has received multiple communications from the government on the events, including domestic investigations into Mrs. Amini's death. We remain concerned that the investigations have failed to meet international standards of impartiality, independence, and transparency. Persistent impunity for human rights violations remains one of the major challenges in Iran, further fueling discontent and distrust.
Muchas gracias.
And we're in Malaysia, where veteran opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim was sworn in as the country's new prime minister after several days of post-election deadlock. The new leader was appointed by King Sultan Abdullah after elections over the weekend resulted in an unprecedented hung parliament. Neither Mr. Anwar nor ex-premier Hun Muhyiddin new government, during which time various combinations of parties and forms of alliances were discussed and then rejected. Rescuers in Indonesia have continued their efforts to find survivors trapped after Monday's earthquake in West Java. The latest official figures say 271 people were killed, many of them children, and about 40 are still missing. Hundreds of others were injured. Damaged roads and the vast size of the affected area are making it difficult to locate and help victims. Rescuers also pulled a 6-year-old boy from the rubble of his collapsed house in Kanjura after he survived the earthquake because he was protected by a mattress. Here's more in this report.
As the death toll climbs to over 260, the destruction and devastation from the Indonesian earthquake remains evident. Rescue workers are racing against time to reach people still trapped under the rubble in the West Java province. Officials say many of those killed and injured are children, with over 1,000 people injured. This drone footage from local media shows the mountainous area in the town of Cianjur, which was hit by a landslide triggered by the quake, as excavators dug on the slope near houses and buildings. Staring at the ground as an excavator worked its way through a flattened residential area, This 45-year-old man waits anxiously to find out the fate of his relatives. Worried about his sister-in-law and her 2 children, he spent 2 hours walking 20.7 kilometers from Chipanas to Cianjur, where the epicenter of the shallow 5.6 magnitude quake struck. He then scoured the area to find his family, only to find their house buried by a landslide.
I'll wait until everything is done. Everything is cleared. We'll leave it to God. What matters is we try to look for them, and if that's their fate, then we have to let them go.
For survivors, the next hurdle is how to survive the need for clean water and food and blankets and medicine. The president traveled to the area to encourage rescuers, promising the government will hand out compensation to the victims and their families. Earthquakes are common in Indonesia, which sits on the Ring of Fire area of tectonic activity in the Pacific. The country has a history of devastating tremors and tsunamis, with more than 2,000 people killed in a 2018 earthquake on the island of Sulawesi.
Welcome back to the US, where tributes have been pouring in for the victims of a shooting that happened in a nightclub in Colorado last Saturday. Residents gathered outside the state capitol to remember the 5 shooting victims who died in the attack. Another 17 people were wounded by gunfire in the rampage. Police said they had yet to determine a motive, but the city's mayor and rights groups have said that the attack bore the hallmarks of a hate crime. The suspected shooter, 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich, remained under arrest at a hospital, presumably for injuries sustained when a decorated former Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran pummeled him in a successful effort to stop the assault at Club Q in Colorado's second-largest city. The situation is similar in Chesapeake, as residents gathered for vigils in the wake of a shooting at a local Walmart that left 7 people, including the gunman, dead. Locals could be seen hugging one another, signing a condolence book, offering prayers during vigils at St. Thomas Episcopal Church and Deep Creek United Methodist Church. Reverend Mark McCone-Sweet of St. Thomas Church says he arranged the vigil because it was important for the community to acknowledge the grief and the shock of the deadly attack.
It's scary that a place where I feel so safe, like just going to Walmart or going to the grocery store, is now some place that I need to be on edge and be scared. And like those were my initial reactions, and then it was just a lot of somberness for that those people had died and that those families are like what they're going to have to go through without their loved ones.
It was, for me, it was provide an opportunity for people to have a place to go today that was safe, welcoming, and that could acknowledge the grief and the shock, and to make sure we're not silent in times like this.
It was very meaningful to be together with other Christians to lament and lift our hearts and cry together and seek God's comfort and peace and hope and purpose for us as we navigate these issues, and like he said, to give our prayers some feet so we know how to act and how to bring about a solution to all of this mess.
Meanwhile, it is Thanksgiving today in South Korea, and what's Thanksgiving without a turkey? The United States soldiers stationed at an army base in the South Korean city of Dongcheon celebrated the holiday with a traditional festive meal today. Senior U.S. Army officials served the traditional Thanksgiving feast of roast turkey, beef, lobster, mashed potatoes, stuffing, green beans, pumpkin, and cakes to the soldiers based in Camp Casey, one of the several U.S. Army bases near the demilitarized zone. According to data from U.S. Defense Manpower Data Center, about 28,500 American troops are stationed in South Korea, which has the United States' third largest military presence outside its country after Japan and Germany.
It gives them that taste of home, and it's an opportunity, for everybody to, break bread together, have the meal together, and then for us as leaders, it's a chance for our soldiers to see us as leaders serving them the meal.
Oh, we're just giant turkeys. I guess they bought two of them just so we can represent the parting turkeys that the President of the United States would usually go ahead and let live on this grateful day.
Today is essentially Thanksgiving, and U.S. custom tradition. It's a moment, it's a day where we bring family and friends together and really appreciate what we're thankful for. And what makes this really special is this is their first time being away from home, and so this is a great opportunity to essentially remind people that even though we're thousands of miles away from family and friends, there's still a family amongst each other here.
Well, here's to another person who is thankful. It might interest you to know that people with physical disabilities can now live and work in space. And this is thanks to the European Space Agency, which has now named its first ever para-astronaut. The 22-nation agency says it had appointed British Paralympic sprinter John McFall to take part in a feasibility study during astronaut training to assess the conditions needed for people with disabilities to take part in future missions. This major milestone comes as European Space Agency appointed a new set of astronauts for the first time since 2009 after whittling down 22,500 valid applications. The agency posted openings last year for people fully capable of passing its usual stringent psychological, cognitive and other tests who are only prevented from becoming astronauts due to the constraints of existing hardware in light of their disability.
To future generations is that science.
When ITER announced they were looking for a candidate with a physical disability, I thought it was such an inspiring and exhilarating opportunity, and I looked at the person's specification and I thought, wow, this is really aspirational. This is a very brave and very bold thing to do. And with my broad scientific background and vast range of experiences, I felt compelled to try and help ITER answer this question: can we get someone with a physical disability to do meaningful work in space?
This is really important to us. Diversity, it comes in many different ways, and the World Health Organization reckons that about 15% of the population live with some sort of disability, and maybe 2% are really affected by it. And so, of course, to be an astronaut is a very exclusive thing to be, but having a disability shouldn't rule you out. And that was really part of this very special project that we launched in this process.
While the festive season officially got underway in parts of Germany as a number of traditional Christmas markets threw open their gates to let the punters start on the mulled wine and bratwurst. Known as Strizzelmarkt, the market is celebrating its 588th opening, and it's set to be visited by millions in the coming weeks. The Dresden Christmas market, held annually since 1434, beg your pardon. It's named after an old word for stolen, first mentioned in the early 14th century. Visitors from around Germany came to score a slice of the monster rum and fruit bread, waiting patiently in a crowd of hundreds to watch the stolen being cut. As part of annual tradition, slices of the conventional Saxon cake are sold, with all proceeds going to charity. Dresden Mayor Dick Hilbert cut into the 2-meter-long stollen and declared the market officially open and the stollen very moist. At the market, also known for its landmark wooden turning Christmas pyramid, seasonal visitors kept warm with mugs of mulled wine. Angelic voices. Thank you. That's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Melissa Ward.